We're back. So, big release at the moment is the 2022 Almanac. Now, this was pre-ordered last weekend, comes out this weekend. So, I thought it would be worthwhile talking through some of the contents. Now, there's a couple of bits we're not going to go into massive detail on because we kind of want to take that away and play with it before we do. So, brief summary of the contents before we take a deep dive into anything. The Necromantic team, Nobility and Black Orc, and the Khorne, their spikes, the information in their spikes, the setups, the team development articles, the star player articles, everything from those spikes, that spike 11, 12, and 13, is in this almanac. So if you've got those spike magazines, you will already have that content. If you don't have those spike magazines, well, then you are good to go and you are in for a wonderful time with this almanac, because Spike 11, I maintain, is the best spike they've released. The Khorne one's great too, and there's a lot of fluff in those, which is wicked. The second, and I think probably the most important thing in this, is the Goblin Star Player rules. Now, the Goblin Star Players, we've seen the models. The models aren't quite released yet, but the rules are in there, and we are going to have a good chat about those. All-Star Games, which is an interesting one, which was literally just 11 plus star players against 11 plus star players. We'll have a little chat about that, Trips. There's long-term contracts, which means actually hiring a star player permanently on your roster as well. That's one of the things that we're going to do in a Theory Thursday. Multiplayer Dungeon Bowl, we'll talk about that. And the referee rules, which is straight out of the White Dwarf. So if you've got the Spike magazines and you've got the White Dwarf, the Goblin Star Player rules are in here. They will be released as PDFs at some point. So if you've got all that gear, you are getting all-star game rules, long-term contracts, and multiplayer Dungeon Bowl. The long-term contracts piece is really important if you're running a league that wants to use that rule. So if you're a league player, that contracts bit going to be really important for you, because your players are going to ask you if they can just keep Hackflem or keep Griff on the team. So definitely one to be aware of when it comes to this almanac. It's an interesting one. So Trips, you said this a second ago, the almanacs, you know, what do you think they're supposed to be, and who do you think they're supposed to be for?
Well, they are absolutely. Here's everything that was released last year that's not in a book, and from wherever it was written or done, and a little bit of bonus stuff in it, which is really good. And it's for someone like me. So I haven't bought the spikes last year. I've enjoyed looking at them, but I haven't bought the spikes, and I've always had the almanacs because I want the complete set and want them, but it's nice to see them in that lovely hardbound book at the end of the year and all in one place, and it's a real little treat.
It is, and it is a bit. If you've got all the gear, it is a little bit superfluous. But I do also like you said, that they've got little articles in there that give you a little bit extra content. It's just a nice release to have, and it's at a pretty reasonable price point. So you do not need it. If you're a league guy, there's definitely that rule in there your players are going to ask you about. So someone in the league is going to need it, or watch the Theory Thursday next Thursday about it, because it's kind of, yeah, it's definitely an optional rule, but it is quite an exciting rule. The books are really nicely done. The Dungeon Bowl book is really nicely done. I'm upset they've not released the digital version of the Dungeon Bowl book, because actually the digital versions of these books are excellent. We use them all of the time because they're so useful to get on while you're in a meeting at work. Like,
Yes.
what does that skill do? Yeah, it's just a pretty useful way of doing it. So yeah, that's what the almanac is for. It is not. So some of the other Games Workshop games, they have the General's Handbook, and they have the is it chapter approved for 40k?
Chapter approved 40k Tomb of Champions
That's it,
the
for
Warcry.
Warcry. That has got pretty important competitive stuff in it. Now, Games Workshop with Blood Bowl, that important competitive stuff comes out in the FAQ, which is actually pretty great. The almanacs are just for completionists, for collectors, and I think Death Zone is probably the best example of this, where Death Zone was 100% full of stuff that you 200% do not need at all. And the Almanac is very much like that. Like, you don't need it at all. But if you love Blood Bowl and you love reading stuff and you just love having a good book to flick through, it's a really great place to be. Now, if you've got the Necromantic spike, you've got the Corn spike, and you've got the Imperial Nobility and Black Orc spike, which I didn't think was that good, then 2/3 of this book is going to be nothing to you. Back on the Almanac, we've also got the All-Star games to look at. And this is really interesting. I mean, what was your thought on this, Trips, of 11 stars versus 11 stars?
I think for experienced Blood Bowl players, this is just going to be that classic. It's another bit of fun, and it's something else to do and go. Yeah, I'm sure that there's few people going to want to do it and have to buy a few more models as well, which GW will be really upset with you if you spend
Yeah.
more money with them.
What's that? 22 star players minimum at £20 each is about £500. So part of me thinks this is super cool. Part of me also thinks, whoa, 22 different players on the pitch with different stats and different special abilities. Excellent exhibition match, like really fun at the end of a league. We did this with at the end of Wobble 3. We had a Pro Bowl where we split the coaches into two teams and we drafted players, and it was fun but complicated. And I think the star players would make that even more crunchy. But you're right, it just gives you a cool other way to play the game.
And at least in this game, you wouldn't forget that star players had a special rule because
That's the
every
whole
turn you'd
point.
be using like two.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. The article goes in there and talks about how to draft star players as well, to have a draft. So if you take a star, you can take a star player combo, so Grack and Crumbleberry or the Swift Twins, but it costs you 2 picks. It's quite cool. And if you're in a league situation where you've got a Saturday morning or a Sunday evening, now the NFL's over, you could be like, oh, let's draft and play a star player game. You know, this is cool. It's an interesting one, and yeah, I love that they're opening up this. But, you know, we've looked at tournament stuff. When it comes to the Goblins, the biggest league impact here will be the long-term contracts. It's a real short article. It's like 3 pages. It's interesting. The way it's done is you buy a team, you kind of attach a star player to your team. Like I said, we'll go into more detail at a Theory Thursday for next week, so that if you have got a league, this is it's going to brief you on how it works. The interesting thing is, if you retain that star player into the second season, they lose loner. Which I thought was really interesting, because I think we've talked about this with free agents before. You know, actually, if a player levels, if you know, because the one thing missing from Blood Bowl is the ability to make big trades. And I think we're going to see that at some point in an almanac, because, you know, when it comes to the NFL or even like English football, the big trades are really exciting. So Tom Brady leaving the Patriots and going to the Buccaneers was huge. You know, Stafford going from the Detroit Lions to the Rams and now taking them to the Super Bowl is huge. Everyone panicking about where Garoppolo and Rodgers are going to go next year. You know,
Yeah.
it's a massive pickup, and it's a really interesting bit that's missing from Blood Bowl. But we've talked about, like, actually maybe you could trade for players, but they join and they get loaner, and at the end of the season, if they stay, they don't have loaner anymore. They've done this with star players. And one thing we talked about in, I think, a couple of episodes ago was about star players having a special roster that you can take, that's a slightly warped version. Well, this kind of fits that, as you can play a Griff team now, and that's something that Blood Bowl doesn't have. Like, you can buy a Griff model, you can love it, but you may never get to use him.
Yeah, it's merging that line between that tournament roster that you spend weeks bubbling up and you finally build it around that star player, and the league team where you desperately want to play with a star player just once in the league.
Yeah,
That's giving you that option to really to use your miniatures and play with them more. So
which
yeah,
is, I think it's really great. Whether you're going to see it used in your league or not very often, I don't know, but I there's going to be when it comes to veteran leagues, competitive veteran leagues, you know, they may not like it. It may be not suitable. But if you're a rookie league and you're playing Blood Bowl because you love the fun of playing Blood Bowl and you love the carnage of Blood Bowl, and you know, every week you're busting out your special play cards because it's really good fun, then actually taking the Morgue Snotling team.
Imagine playing a little stunty league where everyone's a stunty league's star players rostered in. Yeah, yeah.
It's just a really cool way to have a bit of fun with Blood Bowl, and I like that. And talking about fun ways to have Blood Bowl, multiplayer Dungeon Bowl. This this is really interesting. It's super rules light. Okay, you build a dungeon, you add an end zone per player, and you can score in any one of the end zones, and it's the first person to score wins the game, and you play clockwise, basically. That's
Yeah.
it. That we've just described that entire segment. But I mean, trips. How much fun does that sound?
Oh, that's going to be really good fun. Uh, I mean, it's another way to play the game. It's going to be a bit of fun. It's going to be one of those where there is going to be a game one day where some poor soul goes, I haven't even had turn one, and the game is over. How did that happen?
At that point, you rack it up and play again. And that's why I think Dungeon Bowl and Sevens are similar in that regard. Is that actually you play the game, and a multiplayer, any kind of game, generally speaking, is a terrible idea because it doesn't matter how many players you are playing with, unless you are playing on teams, someone's going to get ganged up on, and you cannot support other players, other teams' players, which is a very good rule. So you can't just no, my guard's gonna support in this guy in this turn. So actually, that's a sensible ruling there as well. So how that interaction works is useful. Um,
This feels great for that whole. You can meet a couple of mates for a sort of a quick gaming afternoon. You're like, oh, I haven't played any Dungeon Bowl. I haven't played any Dungeon Bowl. Well, let's all play some Dungeon Bowl and let's have some fun.
yeah, I think that's really cool. I mean, I really would have liked to see some other rules or some more stuff in there, but actually, what they've got in the article is very logical, and it works out nicely. And uh, and that's awesome. Now, talking of articles, the referee rules in there is the article from White Dwarf. It was White Dwarf, wasn't it?
Yeah, White Dwarf it was in.
Yeah, and that is the Almanac. There's a bunch of pictures in it as well. There's some stuff in there about who won the Blood Bowl each year, but I don't know like how important that is to you. I did,
It's a nice bit of fluff. Nice. It's something just to fill out your knowledge. It
yeah,
feels a bit more like the old companion that they'd have in
yeah.
back in second edition days when you'd be like, oh, I never read that tiny weird article.
The second edition handbook was peak Blood Bowl though. I think for me, it was excellent. That's that. I love that thing. Right. Well, that wraps up the Almanac's contents. Ian, what's your thoughts on it? Positive, negative, medium?
Absolutely positive. I am. Can't wait till Saturday to go pick and she'll be flicking through it Saturday afternoon while brewing up what bit of hobby to do next.
Yeah. So I think it's always important to take the angle of better if that's a probably just a life thing. It's great to have it together in a book. If you haven't been able to pick up the spikes or haven't wanted to pick up the spikes, this is going to save you some money, and it's got a load of cool Blood Bowl stuff in, and they're opening up what they're doing with Blood Bowl. It is rules light. It is content light if you've already got the other stuff. And like the All-Star games, the long-term contracts, and the multiplayer Dungeon Bowl is probably about 6 pages of things. Having it together is pretty wicked, but I feel like they could have given us a little bit more, but then it would definitely be wandering into Death Zone territory, and I don't know if they know what the difference is. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like, this is like the All-Star games, long-term contracts, multiplayer Dungeon Bowl. That feels like Death Zone content. And I don't know if we're going to see a Death Zone again. I assume we are, but yeah, strange one. That's probably my only criticism, is that it is rules light if you've already got the gear, but I mean, it's more Blood Bowl, and more Blood Bowl is more better. So I'm a big fan of that. Anyway, we've got one more topic to talk about, so we're going to take a very quick break and we'll be right back. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to help support the channel even further, please like and subscribe, or come join us on our Patreon. We have early access to content. We get loads of feedback from you guys, and we try and do competitions as much as we can. Or you can get yourself some Bonehead podcast merch on our Spreadshirt site. So if you want to support a team, especially for the Bonehead Championship, you can pick up a shirt, a mug, things like that. It all helps support the channel, and we really appreciate it. Anyway, links below. Thank you very much. Happy blocking.